In April 2017, Pepsi released a 2-minute and 40-second advertisement starring Kendall Jenner. It showed a vague street protest, signs with no clear message, smiling crowds, police officers standing calmly in riot gear. The ad ended with Jenner handing a can of Pepsi to an officer, who accepted it, as the crowd erupted in applause. Within hours, the response was overwhelming, but not in the way Pepsi expected. By the next morning, the advertisement had been viewed tens of millions of times across YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Hashtags calling the ad tone deaf trended globally. Protesters, journalists, civil rights activists, and ordinary viewers accused Pepsi of trivializing real-world demonstrations and police violence. By the end of the second day, Pepsi pulled the ad and issued a public apology. Kendall Jenner released a statement saying she felt really bad and never would have imagined the reaction. What was intended as a message of unity became one of the most cited examples of corporate misjudgment in modern advertising. This is the story of how a global brand with decades of marketing dominance misread the moment, how a single ad exposed deeper strategic problems, and how attention turned into reputational crisis in less than 48 hours. To understand why the backlash was so severe, it helps to understand the moment Pepsi chose to enter. By 2017, protests were no longer abstract symbols. The Black Lives Matter movement had grown into a global force following the deaths of Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and others. Images of real confrontations between police and demonstrators were still fresh. In 2016 alone, more than 1,000 people were killed by police in the United States, according to the Washington Post's Fatal Force database. Protests had become emotionally charged, politically divisive, and deeply personal for millions of people. At the same time, brands were increasingly attempting to align themselves with social causes. Nike, Apple, and Dove had all seen success using purpose-driven messaging. Pepsi wanted to join that space. The company described the ad as a reflection of the global spirit of unity, peace, and understanding. But the execution told a different story. The protest in the ad had no cause. The signs were intentionally vague. Messages like "join the conversation" and "love" replaced specific demands. The police presence was stylized and friendly. The moment of tension was resolved not through dialogue or reform, but through a soda. Almost immediately, viewers drew comparisons to real protest imagery. The most cited was the 2016 photograph of Ishia Evans, a black woman standing calmly as police in riot gear approached her during a Black Lives Matter protest in Baton Rouge. The Pepsi ad appeared to replicate the visual language of real struggle while stripping it of context, risk, and consequence. Criticism intensified because of who delivered the message. Kendall Jenner, one of the most recognizable celebrities in the world, portrayed a model who could step into a protest, resolve tension, and walk away unscathed. For many viewers, this reinforced the perception that Pepsi was using activism as aesthetic rather than substance. The response from the public was swift. Social media flooded with parody videos, memes, and commentary. Bernice King, daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., tweeted a reference to her father's assassination, saying, "If only Daddy would have known about the power of #Pepsi." The tweet was shared tens of thousands of times. Within 24 hours, Pepsi faced a situation most brands work for years to avoid. They were the center of the global conversation, but entirely on the wrong terms. Pepsi issued an apology stating that the ad missed the mark and that it would be pulled from circulation. The company added that it never intended to make light of any serious issue. Kendall Jenner released her own apology days later, visibly emotional, saying she felt terrible. From a crisis response standpoint, Pepsi acted quickly. The ad was removed. Statements were issued. The campaign was cancelled, but the damage had already been done. The immediate question was obvious. How did this get approved? Pepsi was not a small company experimenting recklessly. In 2017, PepsiCo reported over $63 billion in annual revenue. The company employed more than 260,000 people worldwide. Its marketing operations were among the most sophisticated in the consumer goods industry. Campaigns passed through layers of creative review, legal approval, brand strategy, and executive oversight. This was not a rogue ad. Industry reporting later revealed that the campaign was developed by Pepsi's in-house creative team with external agency collaboration. The concept had gone through months of development. Multiple executives had signed off. Focus groups had reportedly been conducted, which raised a more uncomfortable possibility. The ad didn't fail because of a single mistake. It failed because the people approving it were insulated from how it would be received. By the mid-2000s, Pepsi had a growing problem that went beyond one commercial. The brand was losing relevance among younger consumers. Between 2005 and 2015, Pepsi lost its position as the second best-selling soda in the United States, falling behind Diet Coke. Consumption of sugary sodas was declining as health concerns grew. Millennials and Gen Z were turning toward energy drinks, flavored waters, and niche brands. Pepsi needed cultural relevance, not just shelf presence, but meaning. The Kendall Jenner ad was part of a broader strategy to associate Pepsi with youth, diversity, and social consciousness. The company believed that aligning with protest imagery would signal that Pepsi was on the right side of history, but the strategy misunderstood the difference between participation and observation. Successful cause-related marketing typically follows one rule: the brand must earn its place in the conversation. Nike's 2018 Colin Kaepernick campaign worked not because it was safe, but because it aligned with Nike's long-standing positioning around athletes challenging systems. Dove's Real Beauty campaign worked because it was supported by years of consistent messaging and research. Pepsi had none of that groundwork. The brand had no history in social justice advocacy, no programs tied to policing reform, no visible investment in the causes it referenced. The ad appeared as a standalone moment, disconnected from action, and the audience noticed. From a financial perspective, the immediate impact was difficult to quantify. PepsiCo's stock price dipped slightly in the days following the backlash, but broader market movements made it hard to isolate the effect. There was no immediate revenue collapse. Supermarket shelves remained stocked. Consumers did not boycott Pepsi at scale. But reputational damage doesn't always appear on quarterly earnings reports. In the months that followed, the Kendall Jenner ad became a case study taught in marketing schools and cited in industry publications as an example of cultural miscalculation. Pepsi's brand trust scores among younger demographics declined. Surveys conducted later that year showed increased skepticism toward corporate activism when not supported by action. Internally, Pepsi reportedly reassessed its approach to purpose-driven advertising. The company became more cautious, fewer high-profile social statements, more emphasis on product-focused campaigns. The backlash had created a chilling effect. To understand why Pepsi's approach failed so spectacularly, it helps to compare it with brands that navigated similar territory differently. In 2016, Nike quietly signed Colin Kaepernick, a polarizing figure, to a long-term endorsement deal. 2 years later, they made him the face of their Just Do It campaign. The decision was controversial. Some consumers burned Nike shoes. Politicians criticized the brand. But Nike had something Pepsi did not: credibility. Nike had a history of aligning with athletes who challenged norms. The campaign wasn't symbolic. It was backed by real financial support and long-term commitment. Nike's sales rose 31% in the weeks following the campaign launch. The stock reached all-time highs. The difference was not courage versus caution, it was authenticity versus appropriation. Pepsi's ad asked viewers to accept a symbolic gesture as a solution: a can of soda resolving tension between police and protesters. In real life, those tensions were unresolved, painful, and ongoing. The simplification felt offensive. The backlash also highlighted a structural problem in corporate decision-making. When leadership teams lack diversity of lived experience, blind spots emerge. Many critics noted that the ad appeared to be approved by people who had never experienced a protest as anything other than a spectacle. The result was a campaign that aestheticized struggle without understanding it. In the years since, Pepsi has largely avoided overt political or protest-based messaging. The company shifted focus toward music, sports, and entertainment partnerships, safer territory, familiar ground. But the Kendall Jenner ad remains part of the brand's public memory. It resurfaces whenever discussions of corporate tone deafness arise. It's referenced whenever a brand attempts to insert itself into social movements without substance. The lesson is not that brands should avoid social issues entirely. Some of the most effective campaigns in history have taken clear stands. The lesson is that attention is not the same as trust. Pepsi achieved what many marketers dream of: massive reach, global conversation, cultural visibility. The ad reached millions within hours. It dominated headlines. It was shared endlessly. But attention without alignment creates friction. The Kendall Jenner ad failed because it treated protest as a backdrop rather than a reality, because it offered symbolism instead of substance, because it assumed that good intentions would override poor execution. In the end, the cost of the ad wasn't measured in dollars lost or stock prices drop. It was measured in credibility. Before April 2017, Pepsi was seen as a legacy brand struggling for relevance. After April 2017, it became a cautionary tale, a reminder that cultural moments cannot be borrowed without consequence. that movements are not marketing assets, and that in an era of heightened awareness, audiences can tell the difference between participation and performance. The Kendall Jenner ad lasted less than 48 hours, but its impact has lasted years. For Pepsi, the crisis passed. The shelves stayed full. The company remained profitable, but something changed. The brand learned, publicly and painfully, that courage without understanding can look indistinguishable from exploitation, and that once attention turns against you, no amount of brand equity can stop it. The real mistake wasn't making the ad. It was believing that a complex social moment could be resolved with a simple message. In marketing, as in business, context is everything. Pepsi ignored the context, and the internet made sure they paid for it.